working towards something. But that was part of what was initially proposed, I believe back in January when this policy first came up for review. One of the changes was to require a professional audit. And the concern, and I expressed my concern in regard to that. Some of these groups are small. Some, they may only raise or work on a budget of a couple $1,000s annually, and if you're requiring them to go have, if a professional audit done, that's gonna strain those groups. And they're groups that are doing for students what, the schools, the district financially can't. They're supporting them. So I think, to put more burden on them, I don't want to have to do that. But I understand what you're saying about oversight, but to just make a blanket statement saying in a policy, a professional audit has to be done, I think, some of these small groups we'd really do more harm to.
No, but what I was saying was if you have a certain threshold level, you wouldn't impose that kind of responsibility on a couple $1,000s. But if somebody, if you said $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, that's where mischief, that kind of money sitting around creates opportunities for mischief. And we should take some kind of steps to make sure that the clubs are protected and there's sufficient oversight on the money.
I don't disagree. A club could have, like, I know that Grass and Silo are the two most recent ones that raise big money for playgrounds. As long as, in a procedure, if you have X number of dollars, you have the booster clubs could be raising money for things, the PMA could be raising toward a project. But as long as, in the procedure we write down, if you have over this amount of money, we need to have a plan of when you plan to spend it. That's fair, and that's something to ask them. I don't know whether we need to require an audit, but the thing is, what is your plan? If it's going to be in 2 years, you're raising money over 2 years, that's fine too. But the thing is, I guess we don't want to have an accident where just someone says, they've had $60,000 in their bank account for the past 15 years. That's a problem. Because the thing is, you don't know, how can you raise the money, even 15 years you can't spend, your kids are out of school.
Well, I can speak to when I was involved with the Sellersville PTO. We would do the Raise for Education, which is the big fundraiser most of the elementaries will do. So there's a windfall of dollars that come in. My understanding is that at least at Sellersville, the PTO had to spend those dollars within a certain period of time. And I believe it was that calendar year. It had to essentially go to zero. So they would designate a lot of those monies for different things, different projects around the schools, activities, things of that nature. So because at one point in time, I think we raised $25,000 or something like that. So it was quite a bit of money. But it was one time, but it was all going to be allocated for something.
Not every booster club spends all this money. And I know when Grass was saving for the outdoor classroom, I thought they got something from the IRS saying that you've had the money sitting there and they had to spend it. And that's when we had the rush, when they had to get everything approved by the district and said, okay, we need to get this done. And because it was doing something, it wasn't just playground equipment, it was a little more involved because they were creating this outdoor classroom. That they had to come to the facilities meeting and have it discussed, but I don't know, so I do think some groups have money that it doesn't always go down to zero, that it just sits there, so.
But as long as the board would know that when they have over X number of dollars, that there is a plan for it, that's fair enough. At least we have noticed that we're actually helping out. Correct. So the goal is not, like Suzette said, not just building a bank account.
Yeah. Well, Dave, were you saying that if they raised a certain amount of money, that they should have an audit done?
Well, I would accept the part that says if it's over a school year. I think if anything's going to be raised and spent within the context of that year, it's only funds carried forward that I would be concerned about, especially, and then some kind of a threshold on funds carried forward and maybe some guidelines on how long funds can be carried forward before you have to dispose of them or do something with them. That would be all, I think, reasonably prudent expectations for this money.
I would agree with that. I would say that if they're raising, like when Steve was raising money, that if the goal is to raise $25,000, along with that goal is an approved plan by the organization, this is how we're spending them, this is the timeline, so that way, it solves some of those problems. So if they're there a year beyond the plan, then we have concerns. Then at least, we can say, we should look into that, what's going on. There may be something legitimate, but I think that's fair as far as trying to safeguard the money that the parents have raised. I agree. But I can put that into a procedure that would accompany this, because I want to have the principals involved, because they work with these groups as well. Yep, that's fair.
There used to be something in the procedures about booster clubs not using the Pennridge name. Is that still the case? And that's why they're all called the Rams Booster Club and...
It was in the, I guess we had the
Guidelines.
booster guidelines that we had years ago, and we actually now went to a policy, because, obviously guidelines are less important than a procedure, which is less important than policy. So we're actually trying to put this in there, but that is no longer a requirement. Most school districts, allow them to use the Rams or Pennridge Rams in their school district. So that was the question that was brought to us by parent groups, how come every other school district is allowing this and Pennridge isn't? So, we're, as long as, they use it the right way, and the board has the ability, which they do now, to, question them and also not recognize when they're not doing it the right way, because then they will lose the ability to use our name and use our buildings and our kids.
Are there any other questions on item A, 2A? If not, let's go ahead to, I know there's some concern about policy number 916. Bruce, would you take that on?
I live to take these things on here. This policy, the brand new one that we're proposing, has all the components. Policy 916, it's brand new. You actually do not need to have it. We are doing this so that anybody who's looking to volunteer doesn't have to read policy 317, 317.1, and policy 806. So pulled out of these policies, which are part of the brand new state law, we actually put in here something that a volunteer can actually click on and find out what does the state require us of a volunteer. And what the state requires of a volunteer, regardless of the level of volunteerism, is the exact same thing that they require of me as an employee. That I have to have all my clearances, the FBI, the child abuse, and the state police background, and also requires a TB test one time, which Pennridge has not done or required, and that's actually been part of state law for a long, long, long time. So, and it's every 3 years. This starts July 1st of this coming school year, unless a person is a brand new volunteer. The example is Christine and I both have kids in 5th grade. Christine has been a volunteer since the beginning of the school year. She had the form that she had to sign declaring that she didn't have any criminal background things, whatever that form was called, the 134 or 145, the one we had people sign. And I did not do that. In May, we're going to have a trip for the 5th grade. The 5th grade is going to go to Harrisburg to visit the state capitol. Christine is grandfathered through the end of the school year because she already had what Pennridge required of volunteers at the start of the school year. Bruce did not. Bruce must now get all 3 clearances and the TB test if he wishes to be a parent, because I did not have them at the start of the school year. At July 1st, Christine will have to do that along with every other volunteer. So it's a state law. I've talked with a lot of people trying to get them to understand that, we didn't do this. This is the reaction to the Jerry Sandusky case. And as everybody knows that been around a while, when there's an issue, the state goes all the way over to the extreme to be very, very careful and very safe, with everything that's going on before it actually comes back to the middle. So this is not a school district thing. This is actually just the pieces of the state law so that I as a volunteer can click and see what does Pennridge require. This has been reviewed and recommended by our solicitor. So if the board wishes to do something different, you are going against the advice of your solicitor, which we do not do because we're not covered. There are some penalties for that. So it's all here and all clear. It's sad, some of the unintended consequences of these laws. One is at the VOTEC, they're going to have to go scramble because we have school-to-work programs. And now the new school-to-work programs, they're saying if a student goes out and works in a garage, it's not even just the mechanic he works with. It's going to have to be everybody who works in that shop if we follow the intent of this law July 1st. I know they are trying to get some of those laws changed. I think the members of the board that are on the VOTEC have been hearing the things because nobody realized that is an unintended consequence. We have a lot of agencies in our community that are not-for-profit that actually look to solicit student volunteers, during the summer. Well, if it has Pennridge advertising it, we have to make sure that every person who actually is working in that place has their clearances, which we can't supervise. And if they are working on like rehabilitation, we have some places that actually do rehabilitation through horse therapy. I think it's called hippotherapy for people who have either mental disabilities or physical disabilities. If that's the case and someone wants to work with them, the patients also have to have their background checks, and they're not going to do that. So, as I said, it went way over here, and we're going to have to wait till it comes back, but someone's going to have to sort out what is actually something we can do. We looked at a lot of opportunities for students to do community service. We can't send them out anymore without making sure that it's safe and they follow, whoever's there is following these same laws that we have to follow inside. So we're going to be careful, and it's unfortunate until someone gets some wisdom down in Harrisburg and then says, well, we didn't intend it for this, and you can do this. So it'll happen. It'll just take a while. It's not happening right now.
Are we going to be able to do, offer any TB testing? We got an email, I don't know if everybody saw the email, we got an email from, right, Mr. McClellan, and one of his suggestions. Well, one thing was, he said that there is an exception for the FBI check. I don't know if you saw this email, Bruce.
I did not see the email, but I know about the exception. The exception is if you have lived in Pennsylvania for 10 years, you do not have to, the district can waive your ability to take the FBI for the fingerprinting test.
Right.
Our solicitor says there's no way that he can actually say that as somebody going to a notary saying that they have it, which is all you'd have, is enough to actually protect the school district. There are some districts that are thinking of doing the initial FBI, the fingerprinting, and then after that, instead of every 3 years going back and redoing that, since they have the initial one, then at that point, letting them do a notary, because we already have one on file. So that's something we can think of changing. Let's see what everybody else, there may be some changes where they back off some of these things for volunteers. But yes, I'm aware of that. That's a concern. But as our solicitor said, no, it'd be better for the board to be safe with these new child abuse, clearance, issues, to have everything to start with. So I would recommend that if there's no problems after a while, that when they go back for their second one, that we offer something like that, as long as the board would be comfortable. On the case of not just the TB test, we're going to work, the principals are very concerned about making sure they help people who want to volunteer, try to offer some clinics in our area. We also have the ability to work with the IU, who has a mobile fingerprinting lab. So we're going to try to look at some locations in the summer for parents and advertise that, say, we'll try to get the mobile van up here. It will be we're going to have 3 different locations. Here's the date for the one over at the Sellersville, probably one in the central, and then somewhere down near Bedminster for a parent to do that. So that was a good suggestion made by principals as well. So we'll try to help out with that. There are clinics. You can go up to Quakertown. They have a clinic for the TB test. We're going to encourage people when you go for your yearly checkup, which we all should, at that point to try to get it done so that you should have that on file. Once your TB test is done, you don't need to redo that every 3 years. It's just the other clearances. But the TB test has been required by law for a long time. We just haven't enforced it, and we need to. We'll work on that. I know that Quakertown School District and Central Bucks are also looking to become sites for the fingerprinting. They think that they can offer service and they'll have enough clientele, as long as every school district doesn't do it. That for us, they can go to the north or they can go to the south, and their goal is to break even on the cost to become a fingerprinting center. But we'll try to help out with that. That's a very good question.
And so isn't there is it the Bucks County Department of Health, the people who they do the flu clinics, I mean, would they be able to offer a TB clinic free of charge to people? Have we contacted them, or?
The ones that Linda Tennant has reached out to, they're still $10 for that, but what they do, they'll bring it to a center where you can actually do it in one location, so that if you do it when you have your regular physical checkup, they'll do that as part of that, but we'll try to get it for whatever the cost is. That's pretty much what they have. So if we can get it for the cheap, free is better than 10, 10 is better than 50, so we'll try to offer what we can for people to make it convenient, because we don't want to lose our volunteers.
Any other questions? But again, this is, Bruce, this is essentially bringing together into one little form that anybody who's interested can click on, as opposed to trying to read through the whole doggone policy book and pick out the pertinent parts, okay?
So how are we going to approach this? This is first reading, right?
This is, yeah, you would approve this for first reading. If the board, unless I hear the board say they're not going to bring it up for vote, we have a statement already prepared by Joe Ferry that's going to outline what's expected. We've already put things on our website about the new state law. And Joe Ferry has things for this that he will then, once I hear from the board that you're going to bring it up for a vote, he's going to send it up, put it on our website so people can start getting, used to what they need to have. The cost of these, he has the cost of each one of those clearances. Then as we start working on the fact that once you do that, we can work on sites. We'll actually post these for parents, let them know where we're going to do some of the mobile fingerprinting, because we'll try to get that set up for people. So he has something ready to go that's been reviewed by Mr. Dugan in HR and also by Dr. Radigan. So that happens after the board goes through this.
But then the impact on the kids with their volunteering, I mean, all these things, all these kids out there in community service.
The community service thing, once again, starts July 1st. So we're going to have to, work through at the VOTEC. I said Dr. Unell was not in his, so obviously, it's been brought up at the VOTEC, the concern with that. So they're working on trying to get some amendments through either PDE or even a state law. I don't know, that's what Byrne had told me one time.
Yes.
Am I close to correct on that?
Yes.
So hopefully, because their goal is that they can't lose that. That's a very valuable part of their program, is the kids going out and getting experience at the work site. So they hope to have that done sometime this summer before the school year starts for VOTEC.
Well, are we going to approve it the second reading, based on, in spite of these concerns about how far off the charts this is? We're going to approve it anyway, and because I know we're required to, but, so we just approve it and then start giving our, whatever kids are impacted by these, or groups that are impacted by these limitations, we just have to start giving people caveats and say, can't do that until something gets changed, or how are we going to handle that?
We're going to be careful about our kids going out to a place that's not safe, because if we send them out and there's a problem, we own it. And for a school district, we are big bucks because we can tax to cover lawsuits. So we're going to be careful, like our solicitor advised us to be. And this policy, even if you don't approve it, it's in the law. They have to do it. All we're doing is trying to make it convenient for parents to find out what the law says. Yet the law is the law. You don't have to do any of these policies because they're in the law and you are subject to them. Our goal with these policies is to put them out there so everybody can find it without reading some 25 long page document of what the actual law says. It's trying to make it clear for people. These are right from the law.
So somebody can come to the Pennridge site, click on the policies, and go find this, as opposed to trying to figure out what the doggone state laws are.
Correct.
So we're not going to change the state law easily. So I think it makes sense to go ahead and take it for the first reading and move on and keep the solicitor involved and make sure that we're ready for the second.
Yeah, I'm sorry it's out there, but the worst thing we can do is not let people know what's out there and try to help them, like find a clinic to bring down here, bring some of the fingerprinting thing to make it easier for people to be able to do this.
Again, one last question. You said you're not going to approve kids going to places that aren't safe. How do you determine?
We're not advertising. If they want to go, they go on their own, but they're not going to be, we're not advertising those things through Pennridge School District. They send us flyers. Can you let your students know that this is an opportunity? They're going to have to find that out through the community. You can't have Pennridge's name, or those disclaimers says, even if it's a disclaimer, that means it runs through us. We still want them to go, but we cannot be the ones to encourage them or direct them. So they're gonna have to find a different way. They can't advertise to the school district. I hope they still get people, but if they go on their own, then it's not a school. The school district is not at any kind of liability or
Okay,
any
I
risk.
see what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I still want them to go, but we can't advertise. The bigger concern is the VOTEC, which they have to resolve.
So that relieves us of the responsibilities. Now
Correct.
I've got you, thank you.
Correct. They can advertise in the paper, they can stick a flyer up on the telephone poles,
Okay.
go through the community thing. I know Percy has something, a community board, but for the school district, we have to be very careful.
With that, I think we can, I think we can proceed to public comment.
Yep.
Karen Wilmore, Hilltown. I guess it all relates back to this policy 916, but I don't know if you're aware, there's two people that work, one works for the school district, the other's a volunteer, and they have been for a total of 84 years combined that work with the drum line and the color guard, Gary and Reby Williams. A week ago, Gary was told he could not be on school grounds anymore. He is getting caught up in the policies that are being put into place and the procedures that are not in place. He has all his clearances, they ran out, they got all the stuff done that the state requires. The child abuse clearance comes back online now, not as a piece of paper. This district requires the piece of paper with the seal on from the state. As of March 1st, the state no longer sends that out. It is an e-number where you go online and you look it up. The school district does not have a way to get online and look up that e-number. Where this comes into play, Gary is in charge of the drum line. He's poured his heart and soul into it. He writes drills, does not charge the school district. He, I don't even think, is getting paid for drumline. He got about $500 for marching band. The amount of hours he put into that, it probably amounts to about a quarter an hour or less. So he is doing it because he wants to do it. He wants to help the students of this district. He wants to give his talents to them and pass it on. The drum line 4 years ago started out as a group of about 5 or 6 percussionists. It has grown to a group of over 23 right now. They have been practicing since December. The season started the first weekend in March, or February 28th it started. They performed February 28th, no problem. During that week, he's told he can't be here anymore. The kids are suffering because of it. They are a minute short in drill, which Gary has written, and which Gary can teach to them in a couple of evenings. So they went to a competition this week and lost because of a penalty for not having a long enough show, because Gary wasn't here to finish that with them. We have a home show coming up in 2 weeks. Gary probably won't be allowed to be there. These people have given all this time to this district. The state of Pennsylvania will let them have foster kids, and we will not let them on these school grounds after they've given 84 combined years. Where's the common sense in this? We have students in that and in color guard who are both looking at scholarships. They're not going to have those opportunities if they're not taught, and if when they go to these performances and the schools are there looking, that these performances are not done well. How can these kids put this stuff together by themselves? They try, they do a good job for having nobody there. But they need these people there. These people that have given years and years and years, just for the sheer love of doing it and passing on what they do well. If we don't get him back, there is a really good opportunity that if he's not back by this weekend, that Reby and Gary will not be back, then that's going to impact the marching band. The EDRs that you have set aside for color guard instructor and for percussion instructor are very minimal. Reby left other school districts that were paying her more and came here. Gary, he doesn't even care. He just likes to do it. Likes to help the percussion kids out. Likes to write drill. He does it for the kids and for the community. And we are really slapping them in the face by telling him he can't be on school property when he's been here for 40-some years, and his wife has also. And I find it so hard to even think that my community is treating somebody who has given so much the way he is being treated, because he's getting caught up in this bureaucratic nonsense. Is the state overboard with the stuff they want? Yes. Are we going, is Pennridge going overboard from what the state wants? Yes. I have been looking into clearance stuff for about 3 weeks now, reading a lot of stuff online from all over the state. Many of the school districts are proposing doing a 2-part volunteer thing, where if their volunteers are under the supervision of an employee of the district, they just need the child abuse clearance and the state clearance. They do not need the fingerprinting, they do not need the TB. We are the only district that I have found in proposals that is even asking for the TB test to be done by volunteers. Employees, that's another story. Volunteers, no. Other districts are only requiring the FBI clearance to be done when volunteers are traveling overnight with students. And they are exempt if they are gone in the state for 10 years, which can easily be tracked by looking on a person's license. The date of issuance of the license is written on there. That's the date it was given in the state. I hope you guys can find a way to let Gary come back and help these kids. They have 3 more performances left. 3. And it's not good. They've worked very hard. They do well with the music. They need the drill. They're a marching unit.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any others? With that, we can close this section and move on to personnel.
The only personnel item that you have was sent out to you, I think is also with a decision brief regarding a proposal from Mr. Dugan to hire 9 permanent substitute teachers through Source for Teachers for a trial period through the remainder, starting April 7th, through the remainder of 2014 school year, 3 at the elementary, 3 at the middle school, and 3 at the high school. You have the price on this. I think the additional costs that are going to come out of the price is budgeted, but it's also a trial to see if it worked, if it increased by guaranteeing these people work every day. Just because they're assigned to the high school or the middle school does not mean that if there's no need that day, that they stay there. We will reassign them where they are needed. And once you get to April through the rest of the year, we're always looking for stuff. This is something we've done in the past and hired, just guaranteeing them work, because there's always work at the end of the year. Whatever illnesses are out there. I can tell you that once we get to April 15th on, I don't permit any conference by teachers on Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, because those are the days when we have the highest level of absence. And by approving that, I add to the problem, where principals and other teachers have to cover for absences. So this is something that we're willing to try. We want to monitor it, get feedback from the principals, and then also come back to you to see whether it's something worthwhile to do for the following year. But Mr. Dugan has recommended this, and I know there was a decision brief, and I was not copied on that. So if there are other questions, I'll try to answer from the one piece of paper that I have, if I could do that. But it's just this. There were other proposals, and he's backing off of that just to deal with this one.
Peter has the floor here.
Dr. Dr. Bavard. I agree that certainly during Dr. Fish's tenure, there were times when we had full year substitute teachers on board. The difference was we weren't going through source for teachers for our substitutes. So now there clearly is a differential cost. What I don't recall is whether we paid individuals beyond the normal incremental numbers that go with the substitute roles, whether we paid them additionally from the start. Do you recall that?
For my time on that. I know that if substitute teachers were doing an assignment for a longer period of time, we did pay them the extra to do lesson plans and then to do assessing of the papers, because that's extra above and beyond watching that. But for these people that are here, we are just paying them so that we actually have them on Pennridge premise so we can send them where we need, because where Jim has proposed, there are always going to be absences at those levels. So we're not paying them anything above and beyond because we expect them to move around. Part of the problem in the past when we hired people at this rate, we did have some that were longer time, the pushback has now been that it doesn't matter if they're going to be there, you actually have hired them as an employee and you now have the retirement costs. Should you actually look at this rate or should they actually be on the teacher scale? So we tried to avoid that kind of a problem by saying that there could be some legitimacy to that. So that stopped several years ago once the questions were brought up. And even though I know there may be some thought about looking at it for a full year, for next year for a limited number, the first thing is to do a pilot and let you know whether it worked.
How are you going to measure whether it works? I mean, obviously you have people in the classroom, so I presume you judge in part by the number of teachers that we might have in years past or up to this point in time this year in the classroom versus those that we cannot command enough at any given day. But beyond that, is there any other metric measurement that you're going to use to determine the success of this particular proposal?
What Mr. Dugan has said was that with these subs that are guaranteed, it should make it easier for us to fill the ones above and beyond that, because we're starting with 9 as opposed to starting with 0 on any day for absences. So it's going to be fill rate, number of teachers that are out, number of subs that are required, and did this help? So it would be a percentage to look at that, as opposed to the fact that if we need 15 subs on one day, we're already starting with 9, so we're only finding 6 more. So if there's no difference whatsoever in filling all 15, then obviously this does not work, and we won't know unless we try it. And then he was going to come back and give you information at the end, or he or his successor, one of us or me, will come back and let you know that this is the percentage that we filled based on these. We'll look at last year, because we used Source for Teaching last year too. What was the percentage during the exact same time period? So we have exact time periods to look at, give you a comparison, and if it doesn't work, then we're not going to do it. We won't go forward with it the following year.
So what has been the fill rate?
He would know. It's been getting better. Part of the issue is us doing a better job of communicating with them about teachers, because they provide other subs for us as well. But it's been getting better, and I know because I haven't received a lot of complaints, and we were getting a lot at the beginning of the year. So he has all that. He has it by day, by school, and by month. So that's something I can ask Mr. Dugan to get back to you. Actually, I will ask him. Not can ask him. I'll get that. He has, because he has it from this by month. So he can give you the whole thing. You can see a progression, but he has said it's been getting better. But the numbers should verify that by percentage of fill.
Based on Mitch announced a couple of months ago that we were having problems getting teachers because we weren't really being competitive, has that changed at all, or is that still an issue?
We're not sure whether the competitiveness is enough by itself, because if somebody pays $5 more from us, I mean, we can't answer the question, because I know board members had asked, and we talked about that, and we can't give a definitive yes or no until we actually do what we can to try to increase from our side better communication with Source for Teachers, which I think may have been part of the concern. So we need to take that first step, improve our communication, let them know where the concerns are, let them know where things are working well, where they're not working well, and give them a fair shake to do that. So at the time, we had a solution based on the fact we didn't have enough information, you know, to answer some of the questions. So we're holding off on that, but I think that we'll work on that.
So has that alleviated that problem because of better communication? Has the original,
Yes, I think that's
Shortage?
alleviated, which is why we had several proposals about 2 months ago, and we're just going with one now to try to do a shortcut with the real need that we perceive. And we'll do a better job of analyzing the data and then do something for next year if need be.
Do we have any other questions or concerns? If not, then I think what we'll do is bring this up at our next board meeting for approval for a trial run. All right?
I'll get the information, I'll have Jim get the information about the fill rate from the start of the school year, send that out to you so you can look at that.
That brings us to a close, except for public comment. Do we have some public comment? If not, thank you for coming.
Can I say one thing? If I could just speak to the board members on a personnel issue that was brought up.
Yes.
I can't speak about that, just give you a 3-minute update on that. I'd appreciate that. We can use the room
Thank
right
you
off
very
to the
much.
break.
You want to do that here, or you want to go back to the small room?
We'll just go right
Okay.
outside. So we Danielle can start closing out.
I believe it's yours, it's not mine.
Well, I think-